The story you're about to hear will take you to the edge of trust and then push you over. It's the story of Thomas Haaretz, a man whose world appeared safe, his friends loyal, and his life secure. But beneath this surface, a hidden plot was being crafted, a plot with Thomas squarely in its sights. It was a betrayal woven so seamlessly into the fabric of his daily life that he couldn't see it. Not in the eyes of his closest friends, not in the handshakes, the dinners, the laughs they shared. Thomas Haaretz was a man who saw the world in simple terms. Friends were friends, family was family. He believed that trust was sacred, that loyalty was something you could count on, something you could feel in a person's presence. But the truth is, sometimes danger doesn't announce itself. Sometimes it walks beside you, smiles at you, reassures you, while inch by inch, it draws closer. Imagine this: each day you wake up, greet those you trust, share your life with them, your secrets, your fears, and your hopes. You go to bed believing that they would stand by you, no matter what. But what if one day you discovered that everything you knew was a lie? That those closest to you were hiding something? That they were waiting for just the right moment to pull the ground out from beneath your feet? This was the world of Thomas Haaretz, a world about to be shattered in a way no one could predict. Tonight we unravel how a man's life, once solid, was methodically pulled apart by the very people he trusted most. This is a story of quiet betrayal, of secrets guarded in smiles and gestures, of a plan hidden in plain sight until it was too late. Thomas Haaretz was, by all accounts, the kind of man you might pass on the street without a second glance. Hardworking, quiet, a man who found satisfaction in routine and simplicity. He had worked in the same job for over a decade, a steady career that may not have brought him riches but gave him stability and respect among his peers. Thomas wasn't a man of extravagance or spectacle. He was the sort who found comfort in the ordinary, in the small rituals that defined his life. Friends and neighbors described Thomas as dependable, always there to lend a hand or offer advice, never one to stir trouble or look for conflict. He was the kind of friend who would drop everything to help out, who remembered birthdays and celebrated others' successes with genuine happiness. It was this loyalty, this belief in the goodness of others, that had endeared him to many, but that same loyalty would also be his greatest vulnerability. Yet, within Thomas's close-knit circle, there were signs, faint but undeniable, of a divide forming beneath the surface. Tensions that Thomas himself either didn't see, or perhaps chose to ignore. Friends who'd once been close grew distant, conversations that once flowed easily turned guarded, wary. Thomas, however, continued to trust, perhaps too deeply, in the very people who were beginning to pull away. Our story unfolds in a small town where everyone knows everyone, or at least they think they do. It's a place where strangers are rare and secrets, when they exist, are buried deep. The town itself seems frozen in time, with narrow streets and quiet homes where families have lived for generations. To an outsider, this might seem like a haven, a place untouched by the chaos of the world outside. The kind of town where people feel safe leaving doors unlocked, where neighbors wave and exchange pleasantries on their way to the market or to Sunday service. Thomas's life had always fit perfectly within this peaceful setting. He was a fixture in the community, a familiar face that brought a sense of continuity to a place where change happened slowly, if at all. The days blended together, marked by predictable rhythms and routines, a landscape of stability that left little room for doubt or danger. But as calm as it seemed, this town held secrets, hidden well enough to go unnoticed, yet close enough to cast a shadow on Thomas's otherwise steady life. At the heart of Thomas's world were a few key people, individuals who had, over the years, become almost like family to him. There was Alex, his childhood friend, a man with a charm that could light up any room, a magnetic presence that had drawn Thomas in from their earliest days. The two had always been close, their friendship forged in schoolyard games and teenage mischief. But in recent months, there was a shift, small, almost imperceptible to an outsider, yet noticeable to those who'd known them longest. Alex had grown distant, his smile fading into something colder, his words clipped, as if there were thoughts he kept just out of reach. Then there was Emily, a coworker and confidante, someone Thomas had relied on in both professional and personal matters. She was known for her sharp wit and steady demeanor, always practical and rarely shaken. Yet lately, Emily seemed tense, distracted, her usual easy laughter replaced by quick glances and hurried conversations. Thomas, always trusting, believed it was stress or something beyond his control. But Emily's behavior would soon be revealed to hold secrets of its own. And finally, there was Rachel, a longtime friend and one of the few who'd been there for Thomas through life's ups and downs. Rachel was loyal to a fault, always eager to lend a hand or a shoulder to cry on. But even Rachel, who had stood by Thomas for years, seemed oddly quiet, avoiding certain topics, keeping a distance that Thomas had never known before. Each of them had reasons, justifications, stories they kept to themselves. And within these subtle cracks in their relationships lay the first hints of a fracture far larger than Thomas could have ever imagined. In a town where everything looked pristine and safe, his own circle was beginning to unravel, though Thomas continued to place his trust in the people he thought he knew. At first, it was nothing more than a series of small, almost trivial incidents, things that might go unnoticed in the usual flow of life, but took on an eerie weight when considered together. Thomas started noticing that Alex, his once close friend, was increasingly hard to reach. Text messages would go unanswered, phone calls would be brief, often hurried, as if Alex had somewhere else he needed to be. It wasn't like him, Thomas thought, to be so evasive. Emily, his confidante at work, seemed different too. Where she'd once been easy to talk to, she now brushed off his attempts to chat. She looked away during conversations, her tone clipped, almost as if she were holding back words she couldn't say. One day, Thomas walked in on Emily and Rachel in a hushed conversation in the break room. They both stopped abruptly, exchanging glances before Rachel muttered something about needing to get back to work. It left Thomas feeling uneasy, as though he'd interrupted something that was never meant for him. Then came the unsettling incidents around his home. A knock at the door late one night, only for him to find no one there. Windows left open that he swore he'd closed. Small things, barely noticeable, yet each enough to plant a growing sense. The strange occurrences intensified. One morning, Thomas found a letter on his doorstep, a single, unsigned note reading, "Watch your friends closely." It was written in an unfamiliar hand, the letters jagged and hastily scrawled. Thomas thought it was a prank at first, dismissing it with a laugh. But over the following days, more notes appeared, each warning him with increasingly cryptic messages that made his skin prickle. And then came the shadowed figures he began noticing when he was out. It started as a feeling, an inexplicable sense of being watched. He'd look up in the grocery store and catch a glimpse of a familiar face, only for them to vanish down the next aisle. Late at night, he'd notice a figure standing across the street, staring in his direction, only to disappear when he tried to get a closer look. Was he imagining it? Was his mind playing tricks on him? The breaking point came one evening when Thomas returned home to find his belongings moved around, just slightly, but enough for him to notice. An old photograph of his family was lying on the floor, the frame cracked as if it had been thrown. Thomas was now certain that someone had been in his house. He called the police, but they found no signs of forced entry. To them, it was a case of a homeowner with a wandering mind and nothing more. But Thomas knew someone was trying to send a message. Thomas's last days were a strange blend of fear and confusion, an emotional spiral as he tried to piece together what was happening around him. He reached out to his closest friends, only to be met with evasions and silence. Alex wouldn't return his calls. Emily kept her distance at work, and Rachel seemed even more withdrawn, as though afraid to look him in the eye. Everywhere he turned, the people he trusted the most were slipping further away, becoming like strangers. 2 nights before the end, Thomas confided in his sister, telling her about the messages, the shadowed figures, and the feeling that someone, somewhere, was setting him up for something he couldn't yet understand. She listened with concern, urging him to stay with her for a few days, but Thomas insisted on facing it himself. He couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was happening, it was something he had to see through alone. The next evening, Thomas went to his favorite bar, a small, dimly lit place where he'd often gone with Alex and Rachel. But this time he went alone, hoping to find some clarity or perhaps just a sense of normalcy. Instead, he found himself seated near 2 people he vaguely recognized, friends of Alex, people he'd only met in passing. They barely acknowledged him, though he couldn't help but notice the glances they exchanged, their whispers growing hushed whenever he glanced in their direction. As Thomas left the bar that night, a final note was left on the windshield of his car. It was different from the others, typed instead of handwritten, and chillingly specific. It read, "You're closer to the truth than you think, but some things are better left alone." The next morning, Thomas Haaretz was found dead in his home, under circumstances that left investigators questioning everyone close to him. The cause of death was labeled suspicious, yet no immediate answers surfaced. And when police began searching his house, they stumbled upon a single piece of evidence, a fragment of cloth torn from a jacket, one that would later lead to the most unexpected of suspects, throwing the entire investigation into disarray. The stage was now set for an unraveling web of betrayal, and every person Thomas had trusted would soon be questioned, revealing layers of deceit and a plot far darker than anyone could have imagined. The police arrived at Thomas Haaretz's home on a cold, gray morning, the kind of day that seemed to swallow all color from the world. As officers combed through the house, they noted signs of a struggle in the living room, overturned furniture, shattered glass, and remnants of what appeared to be a desperate attempt to fend off an attacker. Yet for all the chaos, certain details stood out in haunting clarity: the torn fragment of cloth near his body, the faint traces of footprints leading out the back door, and most disturbingly, a note found crumpled in Thomas's hand that read, "You should have left it alone." Detectives soon began piecing together the last days of Thomas's life, drawing on witness statements, phone records, and his sister's account of his recent fears. But the investigation quickly hit a wall. None of the usual motives, money, jealousy, revenge, seemed to apply. Thomas was well-liked, lived a simple life, and had no known enemies. The case became a puzzle, one with too many missing pieces, and each new discovery only seemed to deepen the mystery. The detectives' first move was to interview those closest to Thomas' friends, co-workers, and neighbors. Among the main suspects was Alex, Thomas's longtime friend, who had become distant in recent months. When questioned, Alex appeared shaken, recounting how he and Thomas had grown apart due to personal reasons. Yet his alibi was unconvincing. There were gaps, moments he couldn't fully account for, and when pressed, he grew evasive, muttering that he had nothing to do with this. His behavior raised eyebrows, and investigators couldn't shake the feeling that Alex knew more than he was letting on. Then there was Emily, Thomas's co-worker and confidante, who was described by colleagues as acting odd in the weeks leading up to his death. Emily admitted to feeling stressed but insisted it was due to personal issues unrelated to Thomas. When asked about the note that Thomas had received warning him to watch his friends closely, she became visibly nervous, declining to comment further. Her reluctance to speak cast a shadow of doubt, leaving investigators wondering if she might be hiding something. Rachel, the last person in Thomas's inner circle, initially appeared to be the most cooperative. She spoke openly about her friendship with Thomas, expressing genuine sadness over his death. Yet when asked about the night of his last visit to the bar, Rachel faltered. She admitted to seeing Thomas that evening but avoided answering questions about a brief argument witnesses reported seeing between them. Her hesitation, combined with her partial alibi, placed her firmly on the list of suspects. As the investigation progressed, detectives uncovered unsettling details that challenged their assumptions. One piece of evidence stood out: a surveillance video from a nearby store, captured just hours before Thomas's death. In the footage, Thomas is seen walking with an unknown figure in a dark jacket, their faces partially obscured. The two appear to be in a heated conversation, with Thomas gesturing forcefully. The identity of this mysterious person remained unclear, but the discovery hinted at a new lead, perhaps someone outside of Thomas's known circle. Adding to the complexity, a forensic analysis of the cloth fragment found at the scene revealed that it matched a rare fabric sold in only a handful of local stores. After scouring records, detectives traced the purchase to someone matching Alex's description. When confronted, Alex admitted to owning a similar jacket but claimed it had been stolen days prior. His explanation, however, did little to ease suspicions, and the detectives found themselves wondering whether the theft was real or simply part of an elaborate cover-up. Yet another theory emerged when police discovered that Emily, the seemingly reluctant co-worker, had recently accessed Thomas's work files without authorization. While she claimed it was for a routine project, investigators began to question her motives, wondering if there was something in those files that only Emily knew about. These revelations painted a picture of a potential conspiracy, one involving more than one person and a motive rooted in something deeper than they had anticipated. As the evidence continues to stack up, questions linger. Who was the shadowed figure seen arguing with Thomas that night? Was Alex truly involved, or was he simply in the wrong place at the wrong time? What secrets did Emily uncover that made her seem so uneasy? And what, if anything, was Rachel hiding behind her tears? With each new clue, this case grows more twisted, more complex, and far from offering any clear answers, it only raises more questions. Now we turn to you. Who do you think is hiding the truth? Which theory seems most likely? As we dive deeper into the investigation, keep these questions in mind. Perhaps, somewhere in this web of lies, there's a truth waiting to be uncovered. The investigation into Thomas Haaretz's death stretched on for weeks, each interview piece of evidence, and new theory pushing detectives further down an intricate path of deceit and betrayal. Finally, after months of intense scrutiny, one suspect's alibi crumbled. Emily, Thomas's longtime co-worker, was discovered to have altered her work records to create an illusion of being at her desk on the night of his death. Her fingerprints were also found on the last ominous note Thomas received, and the fabric from the scene matched a jacket police found in her possession. The weight of evidence against her was staggering. Under mounting pressure, Emily eventually confessed not to committing the murder herself, but to having been involved in an elaborate plot to frighten Thomas for reasons that remained unclear. Emily claimed it was meant to be a series of harmless pranks orchestrated by a small circle of Thomas's friends, including herself, Alex, and Rachel, meant to scare Thomas as payback for a long-forgotten grudge. But something had gone wrong. Emily's confession, however, only partially lifted the veil on the crime. She insisted that the plan had been harmless, yet someone had taken it a step further, pushing it into deadly territory. She claimed that Alex and Rachel both knew more than they were letting on. But without concrete evidence, the case against them remained tenuous. The police could only charge Emily with harassment and interference, while Alex and Rachel walked free, their true involvement in the crime remaining a mystery. Though the case was officially closed, unanswered questions haunted investigators and the community alike. If Emily's account was true, who had escalated the plot from a twisted prank into a lethal act? Alex and Rachel had both claimed innocence, and though suspicion hung heavily over them, no conclusive evidence ever linked them directly to Thomas's death. Then there was the unidentified figure seen on the surveillance footage, a person whose face was never clearly visible, whose identity was left only to speculation. And why Thomas? Friends and family struggled to understand why anyone would harbor such hatred for a man so widely liked. Did Thomas uncover a secret, something that threatened someone powerful enough to take drastic measures? The note crumpled in Thomas's hand, "You should have left it alone," suggested a motive rooted in something he knew, or something he'd stumbled upon by accident. But what that something was, the investigation never determined. The very fabric of Thomas's life seemed to unravel, yet no one could identify the missing thread. In the end, the murder of Thomas Haaretz left more questions than answers. Was it truly a prank gone horribly wrong, as Emily claimed? Or was there a deeper, darker motive behind the crime, something too deeply buried for even the closest friends to admit? As the dust settled, one truth became clear: betrayal can come from the places you least expect, and the people you trust can harbor secrets that remain hidden until it's too late. How well do we really know those we call friends? What if the people we trust most are the ones who hide the deepest secrets? As you reflect on Thomas's story, we invite you to share your theories. Do you think justice was served? Was someone else behind Thomas's death? And what would you do if you found yourself caught in a web of lies, not knowing which friend might betray you next? As you turn off this story tonight, remember, sometimes the ones we keep closest are those we should fear the most. As we wrap up the haunting story of Thomas Haaretz, the questions linger, begging for answers that may never fully come to light. Who do you believe was truly behind this crime? Was Emily's confession the full truth? Or was she merely a piece in a larger, darker puzzle? And what about Alex and Rachel? Were they innocent bystanders, or did they play a more sinister role? We'd love to hear your theories. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's keep this conversation going. Maybe together we can uncover perspectives that might just bring us closer to the truth. If you're as captivated by untold mysteries, the psychology of betrayal, and the complexities of real-life crime stories, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. We dive deep into cases like these, peeling back layers to reveal the darkest sides of human nature. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to join us next time as we continue to explore the unknown, one story at a time.